Call to order the City Council work session for City of East Grand Forks for Tuesday, July 23rd, 2019 is now 5:14. City Clerk, please call roll.
Mayor Steve Gander.
Here.
Council President Mark Olstead.
Here.
Council Vice President Chad Grassel. Council Members Clarence Vetter.
Here.
Dale Helms.
Here.
Tim Riopel.
Here.
Tim Johnson.
Here.
Mark Demers.
Does term quorum.
Okay.
Number one, update from the North Country Food Bank. Mr. Gorte.
Mr. President, members of the council and mayor, we have the good fortune of having Susie Novak here today. She is the executive director of the North Country Food Bank. Susie and the North Country Food Bank are moving into a building that is being sold to them by R.J. Zeverill. It's the building that was formerly used by Sacred Heart for school uses after the flood. And they are moving their food bank operations to town. They're bringing 11 jobs into East Grand Forks. And Susie is here to talk about it. Mr. Demers, I put the report, the RCA next to you. That's what that paper is. I didn't know which seat you'd be in. When I went online, I know that when I've done things, sometimes pages stick or whatever. This page was not included in the digital packet, so I wanted to make sure you had this in hand to have the information. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask if Ms. Novak could come and talk about her operations and what they're doing. At this point, this requires no action from the city, and they are not requesting any financial aid at this time, although that may be a future request.
Sounds good.
And she's excited.
You guys want to take one and pass them down, just a little bit about the food bank, information about our operation. Thanks for having me in today. So as you mentioned, I'm Susie Novak, the Executive Director of North Country Food Bank. For those of you who aren't super familiar with the food bank's work, we've been in existence for 36 years. We've been operating out of Crookston. We source donated food nationally, regionally, and locally. We bring it into our warehouse, and we turn around and distribute that food to 220 charitable organizations across northwest and west central Minnesota. If in these folders I'm passing around, the shaded area of Minnesota, that's what we cover. So basically from the Canadian border down as far south as Browns Valley, which is even with the Twin Cities, but on the west side of the state, and we go as far east as Bemidji and Osakis. And our growth has increased tremendously. When I started there, we were distributing 1.8 million pounds of food annually. Last year, we did 10 million pounds of food. That's roughly the equivalent of 8.5 million meals in northwest Minnesota. So we work with partner agencies like food shelves, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, senior centers. In order to get food from us, they have to be a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and they cannot charge for the food they distribute to people in need. So we've been outgrowing our facility at a rapid pace the last 4 or 5 years, and we embarked on a building project probably about that long ago. We started looking for bigger facilities in the Crookston area. We needed roughly 30,000 square feet, so there wasn't a lot of available buildings. We always wanted to acquire a building and not build new. So we knew it was the right thing to do in order to be able to feed more people, but also we are a member of Feeding America, the nation's food bank network, and contractually they monitor us and deemed our building non-compliant for storage capacity. So it was the right thing to do, but we also are required to do it. So we started on this project, and since there was no existing buildings kind of in a 50-mile vicinity of Crookston, we worked on a building project building new. We got 6 acres of land donated to us in Crookston, and we pursued the building project. The cost was going to be about $6 million, and that was like 2 or 3 years ago, so I can't even fathom to guess what that is today, but feels like probably more than $6 million at this point. And we did pursue state bonding funding. Polk County sponsored us, and we were eligible for 50% of the project cost. And so we were raising our share in order to get that share. And about 3 or 4 weeks ago, this building came to our attention. We had looked at it back in the beginning, but it wasn't for sale at that point. And we made a deal that's roughly going to save us $4 million plus on the building project. And we'll be in there hopefully by the end of this year. We have to add freezer cooler space, drive-in freezer cooler space for forklifts. We have to add loading dock and take down some walls, but other than that, it's, fairly suitable for our needs. So we're very excited because this is going to happen a lot quicker than we thought, which will be a big deal for capacity issues for us and for the agencies that we serve across the region. So that's what we have going on right now. There's only 5 food banks in the whole state of Minnesota, so it is a big deal to have a food bank in your town, and typically, just by proximity, we end up serving the community where we're located more, just, timing issues and maybe the status of the food we get and how long of a shelf life it has, those types of things. So we've talked with the local food shelf here in town. They're very excited that we're moving to town. We're very excited. This wasn't something we intended. We always intended to stay in Crookston, but it's about the economics for us. We want to be good stewards of our money. Every dollar we raise helps us provide enough food to provide 5 meals. So anything we can save on this building project is a huge deal for us. And this is the right facility at the right time and the right location for us. So.
Anybody else? Anybody have any questions or comments?
No.
Mr. Demers.
Thank you. I'd just like to say it's an unfortunate need, but I certainly welcome your guys' new home here, and look forward to a lot of new things, and thank you for choosing East Grand Forks.
I know I have spoken with you in the past about the work that you do and the efficiency with which you can get the food and then redistribute the food is amazing. And I know, just like you said, so many food shelves and other where it's actually handed and delivered to the citizens really need you and doing what you do. So I hope it turns out to be a good hub for you to serve this whole area. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. You make a good point. That's one thing I probably should have mentioned. All those agencies and all the other communities, there are 220 partner organizations. What a lot of people don't realize is they get between 70 and 90% of all their food that they distribute. It comes from our organization. So the food shelf, like in Baudette or Alexandria or Crookston, wherever it is, that's coming from us. So even if you maybe weren't aware of our work, you would have noticed if we weren't there. And efficiency, one thing we're very proud of. There's not many nonprofits anywhere in the United States who can say this, but at least 96 cents of every dollar we raise goes straight back into feeding people. And that's, in Minnesota, I think they print a charity review report that says anything over 65 cents is considered really good. So at 96 cents, we're very proud of that at the food bank. We're excited to be coming into the community. We will have tons of volunteer opportunities. We use more than 11,000 volunteer hours a year for work we do. We can take groups of size 2 people to 100 people at a time, so it's really convenient for groups and organizations that want to help with volunteer work too.
When do you expect that you'll be operating this year?
We're hoping, our goal is end of the calendar year, be operating out of this location.
And if the city council wanted to come and take a look, would you?
Oh, we would love to have everybody, and we'll be doing a big open house and invite the community in too. A lot of people never fully understand what food banking is or does until they walk in the facility and see what's happening in there. I've never had anybody, and we don't have a great facility. We easily have the worst in the region for like what the actual building is right now because of space issues and whatnot. But even so, people come in and I've never heard, oh yeah, that's what I thought it was. It's always, I cannot believe this even exists here. So it's a big deal. And,
well, I was going to say, the folks in Crookston have been made aware of this. It made the news in Crookston today, but Susie was taking action to make sure that folks in Crookston were aware. And this is a space need. It's a case of they came to us because of their space need. They need at least 30,000 square feet. The building has 35,000. It's not a case of us trying to raid somebody. We were happy to accommodate, and we're sure if the circumstances are reversed, we'd be sad to see somebody departing, but happy to see them stay close too.
Wonderful. Mr. Demers.
Thank you. I do have one other question. Anticipating that volume of food being brought in and being brought out, do you anticipate any issues with, you've driven down that road, obviously.
Right. Yeah, it's not great.
It needs repair, and it's kind of been on our radar for a while.
We do, we have semis and straight trucks going out every day, and then we have semis coming in every day. It isn't a great road, but not something I was going to tackle at this point in time.
No, I mean, just something for us to start thinking
Yeah,
about is what we want to do with that.
Definitely. We do bring in a lot of traffic. We also bring agencies to town. Some agencies do prefer to pick up versus delivery. It's very few. It's not as many. But we hold agency meetings. We're also tasked with monitoring those 220 organizations for compliance with food safety standards, civil rights, all that kind of stuff. So we are doing a lot of behind-the-scenes work and do have a lot of, and with volunteers, a lot of people in and out of our facility. We use probably 1,500. In Crookston, we have probably 1,500 volunteers that come in annually. Over here, I anticipate that would be much bigger because we would draw from East Grand Forks and Grand Forks for volunteer work.
Yeah, I just know I thought I saw Mr. Lush in here. You might want to take a look at that intersection if we're going to have quite a bit more truck traffic. So we can show you later.
All right, anything else? Appreciate coming in.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to it and stay tuned. We'll let you know when we have stuff going on, and we sure hope you all will come over and see it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Move on to number 2, discussion of potential and jurisdictional transfer of U.S. Business Highway 2 and Demers Avenue. Mr. Emery.
Thank you, Mr. President. We do have here tonight Darren Lash with MnDOT, who's going to kind of help explain everything here too. So I guess to start out, we were contacted by MnDOT in regards to the potential for a jurisdictional transfer of highway systems. And what we're looking at is the potential transfer would include MnDOT taking over Demers Avenue from 4th Street, right out here at the stoplights, from 4th Street out to Highway 2, while the City of East Grand Forks would take over jurisdiction of Business Highway 2, again from 4th Street lights here, basically along Business Highway 2 all the way out to Highway 2. So the map that I've included in here, just so you understand, MnDOT, again, this is what the city would own and MnDOT would own if the jurisdictional transfer went through. So again, the City of East Grand Forks would have all of Business Highway 2, and then MnDOT, currently from the Sorley Bridge to 4th, that's under MnDOT jurisdiction right now, but they would also take over Demers Avenue then all the way out to Highway 2. So with that, had kind of put together a memo, kind of the pros and cons. So I kind of want to go through that. So some of the reasons for the exchange, and Darren may want to explain this in more detail later too here, but the Minnesota legislature has set aside funding for jurisdictional transfers that can be used to restore the trunk highway system, such as Business Highway 2, after a turnback. Demers Avenue right now is one of the few principal arterials in the district that are under local jurisdiction. And principal arterials are eligible for NHS funding. And then Demers Avenue currently carries about 2 to 3 times the amount of traffic as Business Highway 2, which is currently a minor arterial. So some of the advantages of an exchange. With the exchange, the city would be taking over approximately additional 1.6 miles of highway system. With that, as part of our state aid system, we would receive approximately about $38,000 annually in additional state aid funds. With the exchange, that entire corridor could be totally reconstructed in the next 2 to 5 years and paid by MnDOT, and we'll be discussing some different options there too. With that, the city would have control of Business Highway 2 in the future to be able to control maintenance and overall scope and overall improvements to that section. The city would no longer be required to obtain permits for any work within Business Highway 2. One thing is the city would not be responsible for 25% of the cost of traffic light replacement at Highway 2 and Demers Avenue, which is estimated right now at about $75,000 would be the city share. Yeah. And then the city would not be responsible for 50% of the cost of the traffic light replacement at the intersection of Business Highway 2 and 2nd Avenue Northeast, which at that intersection, we basically have two legs, so we'd be responsible for approximately about $150,000.
Which one is that?
Business 2 and Highway 2, or Business 2 and 2nd Avenue.
I think that one would be fully, if it was transferred, that would be 100% cities.
Right. That's what I was going to ask.
Afterwards.
Oh,
So it'd be
yeah.
300,000.
Yep, yep. Okay. So then some of the disadvantages, and I visited with Jason a little bit too. I mean, of course, anytime we take over additional mileage, there's increased maintenance. So right now, staff has kind of estimated that just with additional snow plowing, sanding, crack sealing, pothole repairs, and utility maintenance, they're estimating at about $2,500 to $3,500 per year, which seems cheap, but Jason and Jeremy King had kind of ran some numbers, and I guess I trust them as far as what they've come up with. So with that, couple different options. You know, if this jurisdictional transfer was to take place, option number one, the entire corridor could basically be improved.
When you say which corridor are you talking about? The Demers to Highway 2 or the old corridor?
From basically Demers to Highway 2,
Along Business 2.
along Business 2. Yep. So basically, we would do total reconstruction of that corridor. It would be a MnDOT-led project. And then MnDOT would basically pay for those improvements.
As far as the reimbursable option, I guess our preference would be that it would be a city-led, MnDOT would reimburse all the costs
Okay.
for that, but the city would still lead the
City
project,
would
similar
lead.
to any
Kinda like a
other
state aid project. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, state funding, it's not federal funds, so it would, follow that state aid process.
And then in lieu of, if you didn't want to do reconstruction, the city would receive a one-time lump sum payment. Kind of with the one stipulation on that, the lump sum payment would require those funds to be utilized on the city's state aid system. And then the city would assume all responsibilities for operation, maintenance, and capital improvements to this section of Business 2 upon receipt of payment. And likewise, MnDOT would assume full responsibility for Demers Avenue. And then option 3, which is always still an option, of course, is just to do nothing. So right now, we're estimating the total project cost to reconstruct that corridor Business Highway 2. We're estimating about $9 to $10.5 million. Approximate time frame right now, we'd probably be looking at 2021 through 2024 of when the project would take place. So I guess if, and again, not looking necessarily for any direction tonight, but, one of the next steps, the city would have to approve a resolution supporting the jurisdictional transfer, as well as, basically entering into an agreement with MnDOT. And I did include in the packet just a sample resolution that I got from Darren, and then just kind of a generic flow chart of just the steps that would need to be taken to kind of finish the transfer. So I guess, Darren, anything you want to add at this point before we open it up for council too?
Yeah, I think, kind of my biggest reason for bringing this forward, I just see it as an opportunity for the region to bring more transportation dollars into our region. Not only can we get, basically the legislature has set aside dollars in this jurisdictional transfer program. So those dollars aren't typically accessible to the district. But with this transfer, then we would be able to utilize those dollars to upgrade the section of Business 2 that we'd be turning back. The city would, in essence, get a brand new road. So the maintenance costs would be held to a minimum, Obviously, long-term, you're going to be responsible for that, and every mile of road is costly. And then the city's also getting additional state aid dollars for that. And then kind of on the bonus on the state side is, since it's a principal arterial, it's on the national highway system, and that's a centrally managed program within MnDOT. So those funds are, we're kind of competing for those funds statewide, but that actually provides us additional opportunities to bring more funding towards Demers Avenue than we have today. So I kind of see it as a win-win for both parties, and it's just a way to get more transportation dollars to the East Grand Forks region. So that's kind of where we're sitting today, I'd like to get some input just to kind of we're basically getting our feelers out to see if this is something we want to put more energy towards. We have plenty of time to work through this process. Likely, any kind of project we're leading is going to be probably 10 years down the road still. So we can move as fast or as slow as the council would like, but just wanted to gauge interest. And I know this has been talked about before, and I think the big sticking point was the Sorley Bridge. And so with this transfer, since we'll still hold Demers Avenue and the Sorley Bridge, that's no longer going to be put on the city. So I think this is a more equitable transfer opportunity here.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Lesh, is there anywhere in the state that the MnDOT is adding trunk highway miles?
I'm not familiar with any, but we've had, unofficial conversations about certain highways that may make sense. There is a maximum amount of miles that the state can manage at a time. So I think to do some of those things, you'd have to get your mileage down. So we're not actively pursuing that, but there are a number of other highways that have been identified for turn back. A lot of the,
But not, I'm saying the other way, where you're actually adding them to the MnDOT.
yeah. Well, what I'm saying is there are a lot of highways that are identified for turn back, like a lot of dead end stubs. And if we're able to turn back those, then that frees up mileage that we can target some of those more through routes that have become more heavily used and make more sense to be in the state system.
I guess my first impression when I read it was that with the segment of Demers being a principal arterial, I think that would be my first option, is just MnDOT should come in and take over that anyway, whether we turn back anything or not. It makes sense from a connection and function standpoint, I guess, in my case. So are all the items in the deal as it's laid out right now, are those all formula, or is there, is this a negotiation process?
Kind of the negotiation process would be more, we need to define a scope for that. Basically, what's it going to take to put that, the section of road that we'd be turning back to the city, what's it going to take to put that into like new conditions for the city, and kind of define how much that's going to cost. I think that's kind of the area that still needs some negotiation. We're also taking on Demers. What's it take to kind of put those in balance, for us to upgrade Demers and for the city to upgrade their section, and kind of compare those.
Right.
I think that's kind of where there'd be some negotiation as far as the additional state aid funds. That's all by formula.
Okay. And then the Highway 2, the section would end up being what it is now, whether if it's a city section now, it would be, the negotiation would be based on it being a city section now and a rural section.
Yeah, we're willing to, if it makes sense to extend that urban section a couple more blocks, which I think Steve
What we had looked at when we did that is we extended that urban section. It stops right now about at 5th Avenue. We extended that east to about 7th Avenue there. and that would just kind of remain a rural section after that is kind of what we've,
Or to the
for cost estimating purposes right now. Again, with option number 1, Darren, you know, like we've said, we'd either agree to scope of work, but option number 1, payment, would totally be dependent on construction costs.
Yeah, with option 1, the city's taking very little risk. We'd have to negotiate a clear scope up front.
Yeah.
And then deliver that scope, and then basically any costs incurred to do that project would be covered with the jurisdictional transfer program. With option 2, we're negotiating both a scope and a cost, and the city receives a one-time payment, and you're taking the risk. You're not required to follow that scope of project. You're not required to reconstruct that road as we discussed. You could go and mill and overlay that road and use those funds for other transportation projects, things like that. So gives you some more flexibility, but also you're taking on that risk if there's contaminated materials or some unexpected things under that road. That would be the city's responsibility once that transfer is made.
So option 1, is that 100% fundable, or is there a match to that?
That would be, it would follow our standard cooperative agreement process. So if it would, like the signal, there's a local leg to that, and so things like that would still require that local match, but otherwise, yeah, it would be as if the state were doing the project.
So what year are the signals scheduled for replacement on that Business 2 section?
We're still trying to sort that out, and I think what we're looking at is probably 2024 now.
Okay, so after you transfer it, that makes sense. Okay, and then
In either way, we'll incorporate, either we'll pay for the signal through this transfer, or we'll get that signal upgraded prior to the transfer.
And then the option 2, the one-time lump sum payment, is that a dollar for dollar lump sum if you take the cash up front? Construction cost to cash, is that?
Yes, but yeah, we're not going to take in any inflation and things like that, so that would be the other challenges. I guess we come up with that dollar amount for whatever year we're making that transfer, and it wouldn't necessarily be adjusting for when you actually do the project.
And then the last question is, does this affect our state aid mileage? Obviously, it adds 2.1 in to the local street mileage, but does that affect the total basket we can allocate? Like, would there be a chance that we could allocate more miles to state aid as well?
And that's the other.
I mean,
positive.
the dollar wouldn't change, but the mileage that we could use for state aid may.
Yeah, you'll get an additional 1.6 miles of state aid eligible routes in the city that.
And being its turn back mileage, it doesn't count against us as far as the amount of miles we.
But you know what I'm saying, like, can we, because usually you do an allocation or you do an assessment of how many miles you have in your deal, and then there's some formula that says, well, you get X amount of miles that you can allocate. So if you grow the city, you get more miles. So would that potentially add miles to our system?
I'm not 100% sure on that question. That's something we'd have to check out.
Above and beyond the 1.6 miles with the.
Right, would the whole system change enough where, here's my point. I guess the way I look at this, it is an interesting opportunity. The risk for the city obviously is getting the money up front and then having to do with all the costs in perpetuity, which could be expensive. The benefit is if you want to try to do a bridge or something, this is up to $10 million possibly to do it. The reason why I asked the state aid question is because it has to be on a state aid system, which no bridge, a 30-second bridge, if you could add another mile, you could connect it to the Reinhardt system. If it wasn't, then it's moot. You couldn't use it on that type of thing anyway. So it's a tough call. We'd have to find out about if we could add
I
that
can
additional
find out.
mileage.
Yeah.
If not, $10 million to redo that street wouldn't be a bad deal, but then you got to take care of it. What's the life, or what, we do pavement management right now. It seems that that road is in decent shape right now, right? It's not terrible. We did a portion of it when we did the up and over, right? Maybe the worst part is right by Crystal Sugar.
Yeah, I
And
think
that's
Yeah, kind of by the tracks there.
by the tracks and where their scale entrance is.
Yeah, and that's over some old concrete. I think it was overlaid in '07. So it's about 10 years old, and it's holding together, and it's a lower speed, so it doesn't
But it takes
show
a
up as
beating on truck
quickly.
traffic
But
in
but
wet
yeah,
weather.
when it goes, it might go
Fast.
pretty quick.
Question I have, if we look at redoing that road all the way out there, have we went out there and looked, is there any like safety upgrades that we have to do that would actually, on that road, for us to take it over and be beneficial to it now with the money we're getting, if we went that route? Or is it, the way it is now is fine, we don't have to do anything? Is there going to be requests coming in from all the businesses that go all the way out there that say we need to have this done, especially when it turns off at 17 there, or whatever, it's County Road 17, right? Is there things that we don't know about once we start talking about this, is going to just keep building that, and they're going to say, well, no, your scope has to be this because we're only going to do the way it sets now. So,
That study
you could
was
get in.
completed, Clarence. Do you remember, was there any safety improvements? I know
The intersection.
Suggestions down on the end on Highway 2.
on Highway 2, yeah.
Well, that's my next,
I
that
don't
leads into
remember.
my next question of that, but maybe answer the first one is, was there anything discussed?
So
Not all the way down there, I don't believe.
Nothing major at the intersection. The one thing they want to do is they looked at closing it up, but got a lot of opposition from the,
I'm not talking about the end, I'm
Property
talking
owners.
more, get away from
On the whole
Highway
roadway?
2, come back all the way up the road.
That wasn't the scope of the study, so there wasn't anything identified.
I'm not aware of any major safety issues, crash problems on the corridor that really jump out.
There's been business too. There's been some questions about the angle of that intersection with the trucks there. So that would possibly be the one intersection that may come up in the future, just because it's, when you're turning right, you have to look over your shoulder similarly to,
You're talking Fifth?
yep,
Yeah.
Fifth and highway, or business too.
They'd
That would
have
be
to take a building
that would
out
be
to
the
get that.
only one where I would foresee possibly some safety issues, because I think County Road 17, that one comes at a 90-degree. So,
And I think there's definitely some opportunities to do some of those realignments just within that cost that's already calculated. You're looking at reconstructing that whole corridor you may have to extend your limits a little bit on some of the local roads to get those lined up a little better, if that's what needs
I
to happen.
just wanted to make
But
sure that we were,
I think a lot of those safety issues can get corrected, or challenges with the corridor today can get corrected just within that scope of a reconstruct. It gives you a lot of opportunity.
which leads me down to the Highway 2 discussion we've had in the last couple months of what's coming up. Is it 2021 Highway 2 is going to be done?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah,
big
that'll
discussion
be-
in that corner. Is that anything that with this is going to affect that once?
We're still proceeding with, basically that intersection will stay as is, except that we'll do some regrading in the median, improve the turn lane, and people can no longer make a left out at that intersection. They'll have to make a right and do a U-turn, which is a very minor movement.
I think we just need to make sure that we're looking at everything and you coming back to us and saying, this is the options, what you laid out in front of us, but maybe look at more of that road if there's anything that we maybe need to do. And also, if you're looking at a one lump sum, I mean, you're looking at future projects, you know, you're looking at present value, you're not looking at the future value of that project, because, you know, everybody knows that costs keep continuing climbing. So you're actually going to be selling yourself short, maybe, if you're counting on doing a project 5 years down the road and you get the money, and it's, you know, so, Mayor.
I had the same question, if we could even go in sections of that road and estimate its residual lifespan, to decide, would you take the front end cost and just redo the whole thing? Would you take the dollars and maybe do it in sections, or wait until there's a failure? But I would think it's important to try to get an estimate of the residual lifespan of each section of that road. And then the longer term cost, would we try, you know, long-term street repair, street replacement in however many years? Would that distribute to local property owners? Kind of like we do with all city streets, whatever our current street replacement policy would be at that time. So that's an effect on our local property owners, that they would want to be part of this conversation at the front end. And I also know one of the businesses along through there has voiced over and over again that it would be great if it could be turned back to us with our local control. I think you know who that business owner is. And that way we could do even some improvements in there. That would be good for our businesses more so than, you know, like a rural section of road, but make it look a little more like a business district than a rural section. So there are some pros and cons to the local businesses in there. On the one hand, more local control, streetscape, and whatever else you might do. But downside for the local business, potentially some added cost in maintenance and replacement in the future. So I would say this conversation should be held also with those businesses really engaged to the pros and cons of it.
Anybody else have anything? Do you have something?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were pointing over there.
No, I was-
Sorry. Mr. Demers.
Talking about the state aid system, could it be on county state aid?
I guess we haven't approached the county on this. There is some question mark.
No, I mean, like, if we
Mine is-
use the dollars, could we, you know, if they, because there was some talk, if you're using a bridge, if they would add state aid mileage, and if we could use it on a state aid that connects to a municipal state aid, if we could use that.
I wouldn't say no, but I think we need to bring the county in, and we definitely haven't investigated that at all.
Okay. And I guess the other thing is there's probably going to be some upset people because their UTV wouldn't be able to go to Hardware Hank or Holiday anymore. Or, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
you extend that no-go zone, I guess, for now. But yeah, it's definitely, like you said, it is an interesting proposal, and I don't think we should just disregard it by any means. But it's
Well, just
there are
because
costs.
just because it's turned over to them doesn't necessarily mean it's become, well, are you going to turn it onto the highway system? Because right now it's not on the highway system between 4th and 2.
Yeah, that would become part of the
So
trunk
it
highway
would-
system.
Okay.
They can cross over it, though.
Yeah, you could cross over it, yes.
Anybody else have anything at this time? I think it's a good discussion to start having, and maybe, like the mayor said, have to look at the implications of future improvement and special assessments. Okay.
Is there how soon would you like us to come back? Is this something we want to try to
Mr.
tackle
Murphy
in the
and
next
Steve,
year?
you
or
can
wait a
answer
while?
that, more of what, if we need to look at it, more of what we want to do and getting do we want to have start discussions and then have them come back after we met with the businesses and or do we want to have?
I think
group
probably the
meetings?
first thing we should do then, if that's the case, is really kind of get an idea of the current condition of that road and what the life expectancy is left, and then maybe bring that back and then move forward from there.
So yeah, I think we'll just kind of keep moving on our end and then get a hold of Darren when it's appropriate, maybe for MnDOT to come back. And so.
I appreciate your time, and thank you for considering this option.
Yeah,
Appreciate you coming.
thank you.
All right, move on to number 3, requests for direction on unlawful signs. Chief Hedlund.
Thank you, Mr. President. This topic was brought up at our last work session 2 weeks ago. Just looking for further direction, how council would like to see us proceed with the enforcement of this.
You guys had a discussion, I watched it, looked at it, but maybe get us up to speed of where we're at or what you found or.
I mean, as far as for the staff part of it, what we looked at, because what we've seen, as far as I know, we've had the one complaint. I do know that it's pretty common that the cities have no sign or no signs in the right of way, that type of thing. My experience in cities I've worked in the past and with other city administrators that I know is taking a proactive approach on signage generally causes more hard feelings and discontent than it does moving forward and going on a complaint basis, which we do now. I mean, we probably get, so you said a few a year, not a lot. So personally, as far as my recommendation as staff, I would say that we would stick to our current policy of responding to complaints rather than going proactive. Because there's a couple reasons for that. Number one is it does take it would take a fair amount of time for them guys to just go around and pick them up. I mean, you can always say that they can pick them up as they go along, but still it's kind of a headache. And it from what I've seen when cities really go proactive about enforcing their ordinances, it really upsets people. So that's my recommendation as a city administrator to you, is I would say let's just keep going with a complaint-only basis.
I received an email from a realtor who's also very community-minded, and his view is if we soften the ordinance and said, now you can do it, put them in the right-of-way wherever you want, we would have an explosion of signs. And his strong recommendation, if we're trying to, it's got to be one or the other. Either we allow them or we don't. His recommendation is if you went to allowing them, it would be a disaster. And so I'd be more along the lines of what Mr. Murphy shared, keep the ordinance we have and then respond to the complaints that we would get, versus the proactive where you become big brothers watching and we're going to pick up all your signs. And it's going to be kind of heavy-handed if we went the other extreme. So probably navigating that middle ground is the best place to be.
Well, I guess one thing I will say is that, again, it's like most things. Generally, most people are pretty good about it. They put their signs out a couple days before their garage sale. They pick them up when their garage sale's over. A lot of times they pick them up when their garage sale is over because they don't want people showing up there when they're no longer open, or they've got it over. So most people tend to do that. That's the ones that aren't as courteous that cause a lot of the problems with that. And I know with my house where I live on a corner there, and I get realtor signs for open houses on the corner of my yard fairly regularly, as well as garage sale signs. And so far I've never had to take one down. They've always been gone within a few days. So every once in a while I have to mow around one, but it's not the end of the world. So I guess I don't complain on them either. So.
Mr. Demers.
Thank you. When you say it's time consuming, do you have to identify that it is in fact on public property? Is that a difficult thing for you?
Not the majority of the time.
Okay.
But just more picking them up, disposing of them. If their signs would actually be of value, for example, some for sale signs from a realtor, for example. Do you want to just pick up something like that and just throw it away?
Right. And I guess my preference would be pick them up, I guess, if that's the ordinance. I question, we live in the age of Facebook and Google Maps. Do people really drive around and look for a sign to find a house anymore? I don't know. I know that a lot of people go and look at Facebook, and that's where everybody finds where the garage sales are, and you can map it right there. So I don't see the.
I would say it depends on the age. I can tell you for a fact that my mother-in-law takes great pride in the summer, and that is her hobby, is driving around looking for garage sale signs and finding all kinds of treasures. She probably would be more efficient if she looked online, but to her, it's entertainment.
So I guess then the second or the third question is, the complaint process, is it a phone call? Does it have to be a written complaint? Does it have to be whatever? Can it be from a council member?
Majority of the time, it's a phone call.
Okay.
You can use me as an example. We just did one last week. Former council member
That was a business.
contacted me. It was a
Business
bigger
signs,
business
slightly
sign.
different,
But we had 2 department heads involved in making the decision. I'm sure David must have been made aware of it.
I was made aware of it.
So there's a lot of wasted time for one sign. So, yeah, it can be time consuming.
The sign was moved.
Depending on what it was moved, yes.
Council President, I think we do have some people here that were interested in this. Did you guys want to?
If you want to come up, if you want to sit up here and just state your name and your address, and then.
Gary Schwingler. We put out signs we do a flea market on Central Avenue Northwest across from the Tech College. And we had talked to the city before we did that. I shouldn't say the city, but the mowing crew. And so they says, yeah, well, we mow on Fridays, so don't put the signs up on Fridays because they'll be in the way, no big deal. So we would put them on, we're open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So we would set up a sign by Hardware Hank. We'd set a sign across south of McDonald's and one up on Central Avenue up there. And so we avoided Fridays, but then they don't always mow on Fridays. So sometimes the weather gets in the way. So they mow on Thursdays. So they, instead of mowing around it, they would take the sign and they took it back to the city shop. Of course, we went back there and retrieved it. So we were trying to figure out can we still set these signs out or not? That's when I found out that it's an ordinance that we're not supposed to be putting these signs out on the side of the road there or in the berms areas. So our question was what should we do? Should we not put these signs out then? Nobody's complained. They were just getting in the way of the mowing crew, I think is what it was the biggest thing. So and then what we get, like he says, is people that that look for the signs. A good majority of our business comes from drive-through traffic coming through town on Highway 2. That see the signs that come through there. So I guess that's my question is do we dare put these signs out there or not? Nobody's complained. It was just a mowing crew.
They haven't complained to you, but they have complained to me.
Okay.
And I told them they had to make a formal complaint, and no one has at this point.
Okay.
But they have noticed them.
Okay.
So they tend to think if you can do it, it's okay for them to do it.
Okay.
That's what they told me. And I said, well, it's really not okay.
Okay. So that's my question is should we not be putting them signs up then? Is what we should do. There's one sign that stays up all the time and nobody touches it, and that's for the American Legion sign, and that's where I would put my sign. But that sign would always stay there, but my sign would get taken down. So I was just kind of wondering why they get to put theirs up and why I couldn't put mine up. So that was a
Yeah,
question
it's their breakfast sign, I think. Sunday breakfast is.
Yeah.
They've had one there for a
while. That one stays up all the time.
There was a big one up on the corner this past weekend too, right down further north of there. There was a big billboard sign, but no one called me on that one, so.
I'm not sure who's making the decision to leave that sign up and take others down. It's very rarely our staff.
Right. Okay.
Mayor Brown. Mayor Brown.
Mayor Brown.
Wow, what an insult.
Wow. You're having a good day today, Mark.
So the answer to your question is the city ordinance does forbid placement of signs in that area. And we're going to be enforcing that ordinance according to complaints that we receive.
Okay.
And there's your answer.
Okay. So basically, don't put it out there because it'll be a complaint then. so-
Technically, it's a violation.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Well, and I guess the point is that there's no cost to it or no, for the person that is obeying the rules, there is a cost to it, because if you ever gone by and where they're doing out of business or something, you'll see the person with the sign, they're paying someone to be in that location, to do advertising, to do all that. So advertising, there's an expense to it, and that shouldn't be borne on the city to do that expense, I guess. So just because, we shouldn't allow it because it's cheaper for the person that's going to break the rules, you know, because there are people that do abide by the rules and have paid good amount of money for some of that real estate that they can do their signage and those type of things too. So while I don't have any problem with the business that you're trying to do or whatever, but there is a cost to marketing, so.
Okay. I guess the thought was, and since it's an ordinance too, I don't know if Grand Forks does or not, but where you could pay up for, or get a permit and put a sign out. East Grand Forks doesn't have any of that at all, where you can have a permit to do that, you know?
Our own property.
On your own
I
property.
believe it's a 30-day permit, but I'm not sure the process to go
Okay, okay. Okay, well, that's all I have, so I learned what I needed to know, so. Thank you very much.
You know, I've never been called or contacted by anybody about signs.
Probably now we will.
And I say, no, I said that. Mary Gander.
Mr. Sandy.
Yeah, I know. A long day.
And yesterday.
Did we give you any direction? I don't know if anybody gave you any direction, other than the recommendation, leave it as is.
Yeah,
Pretty much where we started, right? Came
pretty
full
close.
circle for you?
That's all right.
Yep.
Alrighty.
That's the world of law enforcement sometimes, so.
Move on to the
Moving
next
on.
one. Okay. Number 4, request to purchase new canine patrol vehicle.
As you're all well aware, council approved us starting a canine program about a year and a half ago now. Tyler Hatchek was chosen to be our canine officer. We purchased that dog, Leroy, spring of 2018. They've been out on the street for, I think, just a little bit over a year now. It's been, in our opinion, an extremely successful program. We started off largely through donations and getting this program up and running, and to get it going a little bit quicker than we might have been able to otherwise, we purchased a used vehicle from the Freddie Police Department that was already outfitted and currently being used as a canine vehicle for that department. Purchased that for a cost of about $9,000 back in 2018. Vehicle does have a lot of miles on it. It's about 124,000 miles, quite a few engine hours on it as well. As I'm sure you're all well aware, there's just law enforcement with all of our equipment that we have to have in there. There's a lot of idling hours on vehicles, so it's not just miles. That's engine hours can be just as, if not more important than the miles on a vehicle. We've had some good fortune with a number of donations. Most recently, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad was kind enough to donate $5,000 towards the canine program. That gave us a balance of about $20,000 in our canine account. City also just recently received a $16,000 asset forfeiture / seizure payment from Ford Motor Corporation that we had seized a vehicle sometime back that had a lien against it. The vehicle was turned over to Ford Motor Corporation with the understanding that they would then pay the city any excess above what the lien was owed. That turned into about $16,000 for the city. Would be our request that we be able to put that funding towards the purchase of a new canine vehicle, along with the $20,000 that we have currently in hand. We had been looking at possibly selling our current vehicle to another relatively local agency. Unfortunately, that isn't looking like it'll pan out, but we do still think we'll be able to find another agency that would be interested in purchasing our vehicle. It's how much that will ultimately turn out to be, obviously remains to be seen, but we'll certainly pursue that if we do get approval for this purchase. I also believe we can get some additional, hopefully some additional donations. We certainly would anticipate us going on to Facebook and through some of our other social media areas and try to publicize the fact that we're looking for donations to try to get this vehicle. Hopefully we can get it paid for completely without having to dip into city funds at all. That's our goal. We do also have a squad car that's going to be part of our auction that is actually starting this week, and that would be another potential source of funds to pay for this, help pay for this new vehicle. The advantage of a canine vehicle is because the miles are so much lower than a traditional squad car that's operated at times 24/7. It's just a one operator vehicle. So rather than our standard 3 years that we would be operating a traditional squad car, this vehicle I would anticipate we'd probably be able to get at least 5, if not 6 or more years out of it. So we wouldn't be looking to replace this anytime soon. It would be, very possibly towards the end of Leroy's effective life as a canine officer for us. So be a number of years. So basically just looking for your support and backing us as we try to do this. In theory, it should be very cost neutral for the city.
For one thing, I just want to thank Officer Hitchak for what you've done. Have not heard anything but great from everybody working with the schools and the community and being around just to be a presence. I want to thank you for that, and I think you're doing a great job. And I think if you look at the auction, you look at some fundraising, I think you probably wouldn't have a problem getting the balance. I know we can hope that people realize the benefit of it. So hopefully that pans out. But I think I would preferably like to see it that way. Even though, it's too bad the other law enforcement doesn't want to look at buying the one we have now. But
I think we'll still be able to find another buyer. It's just at what level.
So, but I don't. If we can do it that way, and I'd support it 100%. So.
I also support the program. Thank you for the way that you and your Canine officer have conducted yourselves all through this, being available at community events. And I think it shows a great side of law enforcement, too, that people can connect with. That's why the donations keep coming in. And it's kind of cool, actually, to think of being able to get a brand new vehicle at no additional cost to the city. That's how well it's been received in the community. So I think it's a great program, and I thank you for bringing it here. It's also a neat way for us to pay back other jurisdictions whose canine officer we've been able to make use of through the years. Nice to be able to repay some of that to the region. So thanks.
On a related note, Officer Hitchak is working on a presentation for council that will go over some of their statistics and calls and things whatnot for the past year. So that'll be at a near future council meeting.
Thank you. If we get enough donations, I guess I can buy into this one. My concern is that we're getting to the point where we're not looking at replacing vehicles, boilers, because they've come into a lot of maintenance costs. We're looking at replacing a lot of stuff because they're met their quote-unquote useful life, and they still might be useful to us for another 2-3 years down the line and not incur any maintenance costs. So just because we've had the vehicle for 3 years or we've had the boiler for 20 years, and everyone tells us the boiler is supposed to be only last 20 years, so now we need to replace it. I'm not buying in with that philosophy. I'd rather look at last year we spent $2,000 on this vehicle in major repairs. We're looking at having to put in another $1,000 next year just to keep it in a running order. Then it might be time to replace that vehicle. Or we put in $40,000 into this boiler. We need to put in another $30,000 next year to keep it working. Now might be the time to replace that boiler. But just because it's met 20 years of its useful life, or every 3 years we're going to replace a vehicle, I'm not buying into that philosophy. So I think we need to come up with a different policy or another different way of looking at how we're going to replace our vehicles or equipment in our buildings.
Anybody else have anything this time? Mr. Demers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Do we have a policy for how we, account for and expend civil forfeiture dollars?
Statewide, it's supposed to go for basically law enforcement, DUI, and controlled substance enforcement. It's statutory. I think we use it. Some of those things, I don't know how you're accounting for it or what funds you put it in, but that's what the law says we have to use it for.
Can we get that as an opinion, please?
Sure.
And then because we have a line that's like for fines and forfeitures that go, it seems like it goes to the general fund. And is that in this line? Because it's about $115,000 to $120,000 a year.
It varies, you know,
roughly
depending on the
about that.
auction, sales in the auction. In, like Ron said, but what we have done in the past is that we assume they're collecting that, we budget for it, and that in essence is part of the, where they get the money for the equipment. So we feel that we've always been abiding by the law because we have always given them new equipment every year, is how I was always told.
But is there a specific accounting for what we're taking in? I know a lot of cities do a specific, this is what we're taking in, civil forfeiture, the reasons why, and then this is how we're expenditure. Is that that's not part of our annual report, right? Currently?
No, when we have an auction, we just get a list from.
Sorry, this isn't
what- that's
specifically
sold.
to it. I just saw this. and I
Yeah,
wanted-
no, we've gotten a list of what's been sold. A few items sometimes are city items in that auction, but majority of them are seizures. But we also have to split that with the other groups that have collected them. So we will write a check for Crookston, we write a check to the Pine to Prairie, wherever that vehicle may came. So the auction is not only our cars that we have seized.
And the ones that we get, that goes into the forfeiture fund. And then, so we use that, look at it as revenue. I mean, I guess we don't specifically earmark it saying that we're going to take those, it goes into the general fund. It's accounted for in the forfeitures, and then when we purchase vehicles, things that would be used for drug task force, or anything that would meet those guidelines, it just comes out of that line item. We don't specifically pay for it out of the forfeiture fund. I don't know if you're following me. So it's not like it's its own checking account or whatever. It just goes into the general fund. We track how much goes into there and kind of track how much goes out.
I guess it might surprise people, but not everybody is 100% on board with the civil forfeiture policy and expenditure. So I think whether you're for it or against it, I think the best the city could do is be very transparent in its reporting of it. And whatever we do, I don't know if it's something, I don't want to create extra work for you, but I think it should be something in our annual report that is its own separate item. You know, I think those type of things do rise to the level of special notation.
Are you saying for the expenditures, or just, because I know because the revenues, I know we try that.
Yeah, the revenue is just one account.
But it's and like I said, it seems like it goes into the general. I don't know if we want to, I mean, when we take in like fees for like refuse, right? It goes into its own account, right?
Yeah, because that's an enterprise fund.
Right. Is that something that we should be doing? Is creating its own
An enterprise fund?
Right.
Theoretically, it could. I would probably recommend against that because I don't know that we would really want that to be seen or viewed as an enterprise fund. That would give the public kind of the idea that then we would need to make sure that we get enough forfeiture to meet our goals.
But we're doing that. We're doing that without doing it, is my point. We're budgeting for a certain amount.
Well, we budget based on history. It's not that we budget based on like say a need or whatever. It kind of we look at what we average for forfeitures, but we don't set it as a goal.
So what would be the difference if you do that in an enterprise fund?
An enterprise fund it would just be perception that enterprise funds are generally looked as a way to generate money.
Which is what we're doing without saying that we're generating money.
Well, we're generating money based on what the law is. I mean, it's not like and I can speak for a fact. I speak to the officers quite regularly, and I mean, I guess I can tell you they don't go car hunting. You know, what comes in forfeiture, if they pull somebody over for a DUI, whether or not it becomes a forfeiture is a lot of different things, you know, which could be, you know, how many they've had in the past, what their intoxication level is, or if it's drugs, you know, what the level it is. It has to meet specific criteria before it becomes forfeiture, and that's kind of an unknown. I mean, you wouldn't, so forfeitures, I guess, they just kind of are what they are, which is why we base them on just past practice.
You're looking at using the dirty word quota? Is that what you're thinking of? We're not trying to shoot for any quotas here. We just don't do that.
And you wouldn't have that understanding as you were driving down the street and seeing somebody hit the curb. You know, you'd pull them over and it just so happens that they fit the law that says it's a second-degree DWI and it's a forfeitable offense, and, you know, they're just, or drugs.
This isn't an easy process. This process of forfeiture is
No.
not simple. It's a job in itself.
It is a job.
Is a lot of that sifted out by the judge in the criminal justice system, or is that all done internally?
I mean, it starts with us and it
Yep.
goes to the attorneys, and then it comes back to us once it's been forfeiture. And then we start our whole process of trying to get title and then selling. So it's not a simple process at all.
And then there's an administrative process that goes along with that as well, outside of the criminal process. It's fairly time-consuming.
Yes, it is.
Really costly.
Yeah, but as far as going back to the idea of quotas, I mean, I guess I won't argue that that's taken place in the past, but that's a kind of a thing of the past, particularly with the new officers that come out, that gets drilled into their head in officer school, that quotas are a big no-no.
You mean past, more than 50 years ago or something, not 5.
Yeah, I've been on law enforcement 33 years, and neither department I work for has ever had a quota.
Ever had a quota.
And if one of our officers or any of them did that, I don't think they'd be around anyway. So I don't think that's going on. I don't think it needs to be addressed. I think we're out of line. And that is just ridiculous.
And I think the hope of the risk of forfeiture really is it's a deterrent for me. If I'm considering that sort of behavior and I could actually lose my vehicle by doing that certain thing, it's hopefully a deterrent for me to do that thing. That's really why there's the risk of forfeiture, is one more reason for me to do the right thing.
That's the purpose for forfeiture, exactly.
Anybody else have anything right now? Mr. Helms?
Thank you. I have just one question, Chief. This 2011, is that the oldest vehicle in your fleet right now?
Yes, it is. Of marked vehicles, yes.
It is.
We still have one 2008 Impala that's actually my assigned unmarked vehicle, but that's the oldest marked vehicle. Yes.
That was my question. I was wondering if we could use this one, maybe get rid of an older one or something that's, if it's, you know what I mean, if it's in a little worse shape or something, because as Mr. Vetter said, these vehicles are made for 200,000 miles these days. They don't have oil leaks or nothing like they did in the old days, and maybe that's something we could use. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a new car, don't get me wrong on this, but I'm just saying that maybe we should look at getting rid of an older one if we possibly could, and then moving this one in the fleet somewhere else.
One of the cost factors is when we're changing over vehicles, it's fairly expensive to do that upfitting, transferring the equipment from one vehicle to another. In this case, some of the equipment would be able to, we were hoping to be able to sell it as is and get new equipment, because you would then be using it for quite a few years. It's the nice thing about a Canine vehicle, if you buy it new, have it equipped with new equipment from the start, you're not having to pay anything additional for upfitting it once you've got it done. You're going to have that vehicle for a long time.
Yeah.
If you put it into a used vehicle and 3 years down the road, you have to change it over to another one, you're again paying to move that equipment, so there's added costs. So I guess in a perfect world, we would like to get a brand new vehicle, have it taken care of, and we'd be good to go for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
I got to think at least 6 years.
I understand what you're saying. I guess if you're happy with the vehicle you have, I guess that's fine too, but you know what I mean? So that's all I had just.
Anybody else have anything? Do you, anything else to add, Mr. Murphy or Chief Hedlund? Offside check, anybody?
I can just make issues on this, Tom,
Sure.
if you'd like me to.
Sure.
It has been a fairly good vehicle since we got it, but keep in mind, it's got 14,000 or pushing 14.5, maybe, thousand hours on it.
Yeah.
That air conditioning now today is running steady. The dog is in that vehicle right now. And it runs all the time. The air conditioner is getting upgraded like once a month because we can't seem to get it to, other than replaced a lot of lines, replaced compressor, putting in Freon all the time. So we are having maintenance issues, along with the front end's been replaced. Well, we're in a pit procedure and did some damage to it too. But it's going to the shop once a month for some type of major repair right now.
Ronnie has seen it quite a bit, you know.
Ronnie is keeping it running. Ronnie is gold to us, to be honest with you guys. He does a great job of keeping this vehicle running. We are maintaining it all the time.
The other part too is that it is two-wheel drive. This past winter wasn't very kind to us. I understand, you know, we did it for a long time where we patrolled the city in two-wheel drive vehicles. That's not really the case anymore. I'm the one that can't get there or gets there last. So that part is also a little frustrating.
Even our Ford Police Interceptor sedan is all-wheel drive, so that actually gets around better than the Tahoe Canine vehicle.
Anybody else have anything at this time?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Move on to number 5, discussion on use of sales tax for arenas and park improvement. Mr. Murphy, Karla, Anderson, and Reid.
Yeah, I guess if you want, I'll just kind of get started on this. We've talked about the idea of, with our sales tax for the pool, reconstruction coming off. Looks like it's during probably spring or summer of next year is probably when it looks like we'll get it paid off. There's the 1-year waiting period before you can implement another sales tax. So for timing wise, we thought it would, if we're going to get it before the legislature, get it time for a general election and stuff, we probably should start talking about it now. And it would be a time to bring up some discussion about maybe what we should potentially include if we want to do another sales tax, just due to the fact that we do have a lot of unfunded capital needs right at this time that we've been looking at for years, but we have not really been able to move forward on, just due to that we do not have a funding source for that. So I guess at this point right now, we're not looking for you, the council, to set any kind of policy on this at this point, but we want to start the discussion, maybe what we could include in this, and maybe have something in place by the time the legislature meets, and we can maybe start that process again if we want to do that. So we wanted to see what your opinion is. I know we met as staff and we went through some of the potential projects that we see that have been put on the back burner for a number of years, and thought we'd maybe bring those forward and get the council's opinion. So I guess with that, I think I have. Steve, do you mind if I give out your chicken scratches?
If they can read it, good luck.
We'll pass these out. These are just some ones that we put together here just the other day in going through this. And this is my copy that I've scribbled on as well. So again, it's just a preliminary thing just to get some discussion going on this. Because I think, we have about 13, and if we included all of them in there, that would be quite a...
I don't see a bridge on your list.
Well, we weren't quite sure if we could fund the bridge with the sales tax.
Well, our portion of it, no problem.
We can only have 5 projects, right? On the whole thing?
But like the Civic Center, that and the parking lot.
I think one was...
We could consider one project, yes.
Oh, I know what they are. You can have them.
Looking forward to it.
Harmony.
Yeah, and the one on the second page, down, we did get clarified that as actually is library addition, not library appropriate or whatever it looks like it reads. So we did tease Steve about that.
We did talk about a couple other ones too. We also talked about a baseball field.
Yep.
And there was another one
That
too.
was part of the, I think, maybe more part of the LaFay Park is some ballpark
Oh,
improvements.
yeah, we talked about like Stealth Park then.
Carla, I think when you and I spoke of it, there's some finite number of subparts that you can have on one sales tax issue, or who did I talk?
You can only have 5.
5.
Yeah, and what we talked about, the Civic Center and the parking lot would be considered one project, since it's on one facility. So like the VFW and a parking lot would be one. And then we talked about having more like a park, and then we could maybe, put smaller ones like the Trailway or the Greenway or whatever. I know Bemidji has a very extensive sales tax that covers their parks.
Yeah, so we thought we'd look into that, kind of how they did that. Did they just kind of describe their park district as, in a whole, as one project?
Well, it's a park improvement plan. You basically put the whole thing together and you map out different portions of the improvement that go through. For instance, it's going to be, our trails are going to need to be improved at this time, and the shelters are going to need to be improved at this time, and you put different costs that are potentially involved in that, and then you use it as a part of your master park plan, and you utilize the funding as that is one source. And I don't think that anybody would require, well, I know you have to require specific breakouts for certain things now with the new law that's in place, but I don't think it's specifically case specific that you have to have everything itemized for each individual improvement.
And we did have some discussion on that at the staff level as well, too, because with one of the things is with this needing to go before the voters, when you have those kind of breakdowns, how many do you put on there and how do you describe those breakdowns so that it's something that can be readily understood by the voters, and so they can make it, they can vote informed on it. If it's just too overwhelming, they might just vote no,
Can you clump street improvement projects all under one, too?
Theoretically, you could, I would think, yeah.
Well, by our current policy, though, we don't pay for street replacement.
In our current one, yeah.
Just thought I'd make that point.
We do in some spots.
That was the only, to David's comment about the idea of the vote or potentially needing to pass a referendum for this, I just wanted to point out is in our conversations with JLG in our arena study, we've discussed that as a potential scope of work that they have a lot of experience in between school referendums and working in other communities, is helping guide communities through being able to prepare that public information campaign to show what it is you're trying to accomplish and why a vote may be important to the community. And they would be able to help us, I think, if the time came for that, specific to the scope of work with those potential projects that we'll be able to bring back more information on later this fall. That they have people within their staff specific to that, at least, that we've asked whether or not that'd be available to us, and it certainly would be at whatever point we wanted to include it. It hasn't been included now in the scope of work for their reviews, but should we make a decision we want to move forward from that, at least that could be included going forward there.
My question is, I know a lot of these are tied to the park and rec, indoor, safe across the school system, I mean, I've talked to Mr. Murphy about this. Do we need to look more globally at this, of all our, the parking lot downtown, just different things that we need to do, the industrial park, and Mr. Gorte and I talked about, or whatever, just stuff we need to do. Is there a way to do it? And we've contacted Kenny Graven about different aspects of what is possible legality-wise of, even looking at our tourism with the lodging tax. Is there a way to do something else that's not required 95% go back to tourism? So I think, I love the list of getting brainstorming, putting this together and thinking of ideas how to do it. There's other things that we need to do too, and I think maybe I know you said 5 things we can have on, it's tough. And I know that you could probably say that about anything, how can we raise the money? We've gone through that with a lot of things. So, but I don't know. I wonder if there's something else we can do too, and along this same pathway, side by side, or is this something that we do now and then brainstorm to think about 2-3 years down the road and look at something else that, the need or whatever it may be. I don't know. Just something to think about, throw out there, because I think we are getting to a point where we are going to have to look at the parking lots that we have, especially the downtown district, of making sure our businesses have a usable space to park. And
It was brought up at staff level as well. We discussed that quite a bit, and whether that should be included on here or not.
That's going to be astronomical. It's just going to be, just so.
Well, and that's the other thing we talked about, because really, if you put everything on this list, we'd have a sales tax for 50 years.
Right. So I think that's, just different things, my thought process on it, but I think getting this and getting GLG to, brainstorm with you, I think it's great. It's just a way to improve, the areas we need to improve on, so.
And I would want to just be intentional inside of those 5 to try to hit a cross-section of all of our people. You're doing a sales tax for hockey arenas, which is a huge priority. Okay, and now inside of that, we're also going to be doing something that's beneficial to another group and another, just round it out to make sure as they pay that sales tax that there's a benefit in there for every single one, not just one sub part of our community.
Mr. Demers?
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess going back to the original sales tax, I think one of the reasons why I supported it, because I thought it was a good test of how it will impact the community economically, emotionally. Will people be terrible against it? And I think it's been, I guess this is my opinion, it's been a success. I think we've seen that people haven't been tremendously harmed by anything that we've done, the increase or whatever, and people, I think, have supported the result. So I guess looking forward, I'll repeat something I said when we did do the original sales taxes. I think we should think bigger, not smaller. I think when we have these opportunities, they don't come all the time, right? And if we're going to do something, we should do a big project or a set of big projects, or dream big and think, use this to make ourselves more regionally identifiable, which I think is one of the criteria. At least it was one of the criteria of sales taxes. It has to have a regional impact, so that already limits us to those park rec type trails kind of expenditures. But it also, like you said, I don't know if we can use it for street parking lot and stuff, but I think, you can lump a plan together for those 2 things, and that's 2 things, you know what I mean? So you could have a park and rec and trails fund and a street and parking fund or something to those effects, and just build a master plan for how you want to allocate those funds within those 2 silos. And I think that's how you do it. I guess the other thing I would like to see is, I'd like to have some amortization built out as far as what's our potential. Are we going to stick at 1%? What happens if you change it to 2%? What happens if you pare it back to 50% and do it for 10 years? What are kind of some benchmark options? I know it should be fairly simple math or whatever, but that would be a document I think we should see is what are we going to try to hit? If we want to raise $10 million and do a 2% tax over 10 years, is that what we're looking at? Or are we looking at the same type of thing where we're looking to get, whatever? And then the other side is, are we looking to bond against this and get things done right now? Or are we looking to, bank the money and do them as we move forward? So does it need to be a process where we have projects that are ready to go in year 1, or are we looking for year 1, 2, 3, 4 8, So those would be my 2 cents, I guess. I think, with the Civic Center thing, I'm fully in support of using sales tax dollars to supplement that, especially if we think of it as not just the Civic Center, but a VFW renovation. I think those 2 things need to go hand in hand for the reason that you said. I think it's got to be more encompassing than just a couple groups or, what we're thinking. But I'm fully in support of that. I think we can do huge things with the Fave Park area, but expanding our trail system beyond that, there's a lot. I mean, we have a good internal system, but it's kind of hanging on the ends, so those would be the couple things. And if we need to think about parking or whatever too, I'd put all those things. So if it is a 30-year sales tax, if we could get away with it, I'd be for it if we can think about it smartly and put it, because it is an investment. If we can capitalize on those dollars right now, I think it's a good deal.
One thing I thought of too is in mostly it was leading into the EDA, is there something also that we need to look at there to enhance that portion in department for when the credits run out for the border city, is there something else that we can do? Is it's, working with EDA, have an EDA portion of that where some of that goes there to help that side of it with the businesses, either low existing or bringing in. I think maybe that's something else that needs to be thought of. I don't know if that's something that could be, is totally separate or that could work with that is part of the.
I haven't thought of it on that aspect of it, and my memory is going to be a little bit taxed on this, but and it really would be whether the council would want to go this route or not. Depending on what type of EDA it is, if it's an EDC or an EDA, you in the state of Minnesota, you can have taxing authority, and I don't know if ours completes that.
I think we checked on before we could do that.
Yeah, for sure.
That we could have a tax levy.
So,
Yeah, but then again, you're levying it's kind of like a levy increase. So, I mean, you could go that way, and
I just thought, maybe the discussion or thought process on that, is it possible?
as far as, is it possible to add this, use money from the sales tax for the EDA? I haven't looked at it, but I would.
I think it would have to be a specific project if there was something like
Right.
that. I don't think it
That's what I'm
could just.
wondering, that's exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to
I don't
specify
think it
the
could be
project.
I don't think it could just be to fund.
Can be ongoing, or is it a sunset
Long.
one? I mean, just just throwing it out for discussion.
Right, no,
'cause
that's a
I
good
just-
discussion.
One more question, Reid. Just please refresh our memory. I know there's a phase out of our R22 systems at our arenas. And do you have a date? I know it's going to step down in stages. You can no longer manufacture it, and down. As for the availability of the refrigerant, when do you feel we would, by what year, these arenas are going to have to be completely retrofit, revised, or whatever? What's our kind of final drop dead date for that, best you can estimate?
So the question of the drop dead date on the refrigerant is that it can no longer be manufactured starting January 1st, 2020. But it can still be used, and it may be available for many years after that. And there is no end timetable on when R22 would no longer be available. It's just that it can't be manufactured, newly manufactured. The bigger question, or the bigger issue that we have, to a little bit of Clarence's point earlier, is the maintenance of the current systems. They're both aged beyond, to use your phrase a little bit, but they're beyond their expected lifespan. And they're at a point where the maintenance that we put into them every year is significant. We're in that $30,000 to $40,000 if we have a breakdown because parts are no longer available. They're obsolete systems that we're special making parts for and express shipping them here as quickly as we can on overtime and on emergency labor to get it fixed. So it's no longer a question of, there was an article in the Grand Forks Herald a few weeks ago about the R22 concern, and they talked about certain arenas in our area that are much newer than ours that are have no plans to go away from R22 and are planning for the foreseeable future to continue to run that refrigerant in the systems as they have. But those systems are all installed early 2000s to late 2008, 2009, in the first 10 years of the 2000s, whereas ours are all installed in some cases parts the 1970s, some the 1980s, some the 1990s. And they say to expect a 25-year lifespan. So it's not as much, part of it is the R22, the issue of the R22 and not knowing the cost. I think a bigger part of it with our current situation is just that the extended deferred maintenance that we already see on an annual basis. The Civic Center, going back to even 3 years ago, we were over $60,000 in repairs on one breakdown. A couple of years ago, it was a $30,000 repair on a breakdown. And it's just the life of the compressors themselves that we don't have an answer for when the end of that may be.
Short answer, 3 years ago.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Reid.
You're welcome.
Else? Anybody else have anything on this?
What's the next steps, or what are you looking for?
Well, what we're looking for from the council is, are you amenable for us to move forward with the idea of going for another sales tax? If you are, we got some information here from you guys today as far as maybe trying to lump some of them together more as, like, say, Parks and Rec and, streets and whatever. So I think at this point, to be, as far as staff, for us to be responsible and bring something for you to really give us some real direction on, I think then we need to put together the costs for what the different proposals are, so that we can set some timelines and priorities, meaning that which aspect would be our number one priority, which one would be our number two, so if we have, and what the cost would be, because a couple things I can see is you probably wouldn't want to go forward with something that's going to, I don't know, like say $50 million total. I mean, that could be kind of overwhelming. So if we could get that prioritized and get an idea from the council what number they might be comfortable with based on these different projects, I think that would be, so short answer to that is I think what we should do then as staff is put together, kind of lump these together as groups and say maybe Parks and Rec would cost $8 million, whatever it would be for the Parks and Rec component of it, and it's going to be the breakdown of these types of projects so that the council can then prioritize and rate them.
Are we limited, though, from the state statute standpoint?
I have been speaking with somebody from the league, and, we will connect with them and ask those questions you brought up with parking in streets and timelines. So I think we have enough information to get started if it's okay for us to get started.
No, because, when we had the timeline, everything was sunset on the pool. I mean, just stuff like that, is every area different, or is that lumped into, no, this is sales tax, you have to have a sunset, you only allow this much time?
Well, I believe if it's the...
We did the sunset ourselves. That wasn't a requirement.
That's just why I'm asking if there's a...
Yeah, I believe that the sunset was our requirement, but it would be the amount of the project. Each project would have a specific amount, and then you're anticipating we'll just say the 1 cent sales tax going to bring in X amount of dollars over that time, just like we did with the pool.
I thought it was a value versus time, whichever comes first.
It is value.
That's law.
The one thing I just wanted to point out is I've also been talking with the Department of Revenue. And when you bring this stuff forward, we'll bring it forward as a resolution to the state first. The state can pick and choose. They may pull out a project, even though we might have it ready to go. The state can line item veto some of our projects. Also, when you put it on as a referendum, each project has to be listed separately. So even if it's approved by the state, your voters still have to approve them all. So you might plan for 5 projects, but only 3 of them are approved. So it will be a lot of work putting all this information together, but you still have to get through those 2 hurdles to make sure all of your projects are going to be moving forward.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Can we also get some analysis of what other state or sales tax communities are levying for these and how they've been successful in their community? I know, we've talked in the past about like Bemidji and what they've done.
I think
with some of their-
Worthington just did.
There's actually a list I know on the
That I'm aware
website of the Minnesota Department of Revenue, and it talks about the different ones. I could just print that and share that, because I know.
Does it just tell the successful ones, or does it give?
Well, it just says the ones that are presently doing it now on the website. I'll ask the person from the league if he knows, if he has any information on that, and if he has any information on anybody moving forward also.
I think I've seen one where it actually showed, and it was from actually years ago, where cities were granted like a referendum, and some were voted down, and so, I mean, there is some information out there where it shows where it was voted down.
Reid, if you would, please, I think you're planning to do this, but since we're talking about costs on our arenas, for example, please, each time that you bring the estimates, would you show the costs for a clean retrofit, basically coming back as we are with a new cooling plant on each one, and again, against the redesign that we've contemplated? Because I feel like at every step of the way, we want to be aware of those two options and then make an informed choice. Please. But you were going to do that anyway, right?
Yeah, that's included in the scope of work that the Redo JLG is doing. It'll provide options, with the base option being just retrofitting or replacing our existing ice plants.
Thank you.
So David has one more thing on here, so.
I apologize, this was just brought to me today. I met on site this morning, so I apologize with the late notice on this. You're getting this is for that bike rack, the bike share program. I met out on site with Pete Haga today, this morning at 8:30. They were looking so there's two things that I'm looking for tonight. One is the locations that they have identified for the bike racks. They need a space that's 8 feet wide and 20 feet long. I know it's a little bit, this is as large as I could get the map. So if you look on the bottom part there, that's the parking lot in between the flood wall and Cabela's. That red dash there is approximately 20 feet. That's in that paver block area, just to the, on the dry side of that levee, onto the east side right before the curb. They're looking at that spot there. Cabela's is not opposed to having it there. They just are not interested in financially participating with it. And looking at that, it appears that it would probably be far enough back that it would be out of the way for the flood wall portion when they have to put up that section of the wall there. And if it does end up being in the way, they can be moved. They're not bolted down. They're heavy metal docks, and so they can be lifted up and moved.
Talking about this?
Yep. So the other location is, if you look up at the north end of Restaurant Row there, where the Blue Moose is, there's that other red line there, that's showing 20 feet according to the measurement of this GIS here. They take it just back behind the sidewalk there. They would probably want it to butt up against the sidewalk so that the bikes wouldn't be going across any grass, that type of thing. Blue Moose, his name, Pat Beaupre is very enthusiastic about this location. He volunteered this location. However, this particular location would require a cement pad, unlike the other location there. So the second aspect of it is Mr. Haga asked if he does understand that the city is not willing to participate or is not looking at the yearly commitment to that. However, he asked to bring it forward if we would consider participating in the installation of a concrete pad at that particular location. That would be 20 feet long, 8 feet wide. I did just get some rough estimates on it. It would require a little bit of that area is got a bit of a slope to it, so it requires some digging and leveling. And then at the price of concrete, we're figuring a conservative estimate of around $2,000. So if not, they were going to have to try to get more private donations or whatever to make that happen. So again, I just found out about this aspect of it this morning, so I do apologize for the late notice. And we don't necessarily need an answer today. They would like it as soon as possible. However, due to the fact that the bike racks have been delivered and the bikes are here, however, everything is being assembled, and it's going to take them a little longer than they anticipated.
Can the pad be on city property or private property?
It could be private property there if it's behind the sidewalk.
It would be the Moose property.
You know about it, the Moose or the Cabela's?
I'm talking about the Moose one.
Yeah.
Well, I think
If it's, it'd be
Is there
touch and
any
go there.
issue
I mean,
there?
There's a sanitary sewer that runs
yeah,
right
that's
there.
what I'm saying. There's a sewer sitting.
Jason
there.
brought that up today. He would have to check to make sure that they would still be able to get past that, to be able to back up into that, because they backed that truck up into there.
At all those aspects and actually get a quote on the
There's a
cost.
line there.
Okay.
Make a
There's a
decision.
line there, isn't
Yeah.
there? Or you can fit it.
And again, that's fine. Again, he said we don't need an answer tonight, but I guess that's just, like I said, I got this today and I wanted to bring this forward to get some
Understand.
feedback.
Maybe get that and bring it back.
I can do that.
If you gotta take it out, you gotta take it out then.
Sounds good to me. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Ooh,
Second. Second by Helms. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion is carried. Meeting's adjourned.